together, we've made a really tight team and building community around here, around the planning of the festival. But one of the great things that's come out of a day in Avondale has been meeting Amie. When I heard about her installation being taken down, I reached out to her for different reasons, because I am an artist. I own a building in the neighborhood, and that's how I've ended up moderating here, because I really feel like I have a foot in both camps. I am somebody who wants to see the neighborhood be interesting. I want it to be an interesting place to own a building, yet at the same time I want to see my property values go up. I put my own life investment in this building, and I wanted to see this neighborhood be an interesting place for artists as well. And I realized during my discussions with Amie that I have these unrealistic expectations. I want to see the neighborhood stay like it is, with all the people who could still afford to live here, and this amazing diversity of people, which is what a day in Avondale is about. I used to live in Seattle, and it was really boring because everybody seemed kind of the same. It was very homogenous, and so that's why I moved from up to Chicago, and that's why I moved here. And so I want each of the panelists to introduce themselves kind of in the same way that I just did. We have someone representing each of kind of the different, not each of the facets, but some of the facets of this whole affordable housing, gentrification issue. And one of the things Amie and I wanted to accomplish was something that's solutions oriented. I'm really about building bonds between communities, and maybe there is a place for direct action. Some of this made me a little uncomfortable as an artist, because I felt like it was biting the hand that feeds us as artists, this whole thing, this implication. How are artists implicated in gentrification? And what is our relationship with developers? We want to see the neighborhood improve, all of that. So we want to have a solutions-oriented panel on this, and to that end, we got a stellar panel of people who can answer some of the fundamental questions that come up in this sticky subject of gentrification. So, John, could you give a little bit about your history and kind of where you're coming from in this whole initiative?
I'm John McDermott. I work for the Logan Square Neighborhood Association on housing and land use issues. I grew up in Hyde Park. I grew up with maybe 1 foot or half a foot in the African American world. So my brothers and I were the only white kids in our grade school after about 2nd or 3rd grade. And I really value that experience because I think it helps me keep open a perspective on Chicago that maybe would be different if I had not had that experience. I've been working with community organizations in Chicago for about 23 years, and I've been privileged to work in primarily white communities, primarily African American communities, primarily Latino communities. I worked from '96 to 2001 in Lakeview on the issue of affordable housing and gentrification. So I had an opportunity to work in a neighborhood that had already gone through a tremendous amount of gentrification, but to tap into some residual leadership in that community that created or preserved over 600 units of affordable housing during the time that I was there. Real quick, during the time I worked in Lakeview, I was living in Logan Square. So I was, from about '98 to 2002, I was just kind of a surface resident in Logan Square, living in the community but not really forming any deep ties. Then I had a chance to do Spanish immersion, come back to Logan Square, go to work for the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, and get to know the same neighborhood, or actually a different neighborhood on a much deeper level. So I think that may help me seeing the perspective of people who are here without those deeper ties and then forming those deeper ties.
I'm Mark Fick. I live on Monticello, just southwest of here a little ways. And I've lived in the neighborhood for about 4 years now. And actually live in a small limited equity housing cooperative over there in Monticello. And before that, I lived in Uptown since about '97 when I moved to Chicago. Originally from a family farm in southwest Minnesota. So this is a very different, I've experienced a lot of different kinds of community and a lot of different kinds of placemaking in my life, I think, from very rural communities to very urban communities and a lot of stuff in between. When I first moved to Chicago, I moved straight into Uptown and dived right into intense issues, political issues, development issues, community issues around gentrification in the Uptown community area, and saw and experienced some incredible dynamics around the tensions and people grappling with those tensions of gentrification. And it actually led me to my experience of just volunteering and living around those issues in my community, led me to a career path where now I am the director of lending operations with a community loan fund, Chicago Community Loan Fund. And we basically provide financing and technical assistance to community development projects all over the Chicagoland area and the suburbs. And so I was able to take this experience that I found both exciting and frustrating and find a career opportunity there. And now I am able to bring resources to affordable housing development, to community-based development organizations, to cooperative enterprises around the Chicagoland area. And just to put a little pin on that co-op concept, I do spend a lot of time working with groups around cooperative and collective models of development. Development that's really based in, of, and for the people that are affected by that development. And so we can be happy to talk more about that later as a solution, hopefully. But that's the kind of the experience I bring right now.
My name is Ellen Ray. I am a resident of the community. I own a condo in actually a failed condo development in Western Logan Square. It's a 15-unit building, and there are 3 of us who own in it. And we have 12 units that are actually rented via Section 8 to an extremely diverse group of renters. It was our way of saving our building, was to open it up to rental. So I am the person who learned firsthand that if you think your home is your entire asset strategy for the future, probably not, because we're underwater. And actually considering limited equity cooperative models where we could build the investment of our renters who have been longtime renters via Section 8 to be homeowners. So I'm a neighbor. I live in Logan Square. I'm also, I'm the 3rd generation resident of Logan Square. So my family went through Italian immigration, white flight, Latino influx, Latino flight, white development, and so my mother was born and raised in Logan Square as well, so I have 32 years in the community and 3 generations. And I'm also the executive director of Center for Changing Lives, which is a multi-service organization that works with people who are held back by a lack of resource and economic opportunity to help them uncover possibilities and overcome barriers to realize their full potential. And we are the people who have helped the people who were evicted by Mark Fishman to find other housing. And so we're an organization that believes deeply in housing as a human right, and that people's economic circumstances often limit their housing options. And so we work on economic empowerment as a way to really help open up housing choice for people. And my journey to CCL was one of fighting in this community for many years for Logan Square for all people, and watching over my lifetime that dream, that vision slip away in very concrete ways. So it is a lifestyle for me to live this housing fight, and I feel very strongly in not only housing as a human right, but as Logan Square for all.
Thank you, Mitch.
My name is Mitch Goltz. I own a company called GW Properties. We are primarily a retail investment and development company based in Chicago. My first property that I acquired was about 10 years ago in Logan Square. We really try to focus on adaptive reuse of existing buildings and new construction projects. Logan Square has been a target of ours for a very long time, just trying to find buildings that we can buy and renovate and hold them. So I'm excited to be here and hope I can help.
And Mitch, what were some of the properties you have that people aren't familiar with that you've done?
I mean, we're doing a new development in Lakeview at Belmont and Clark. We bought a piece of land. We're building an apartment building and retail complex. I partnered on some buildings on Milwaukee Avenue. 7-Eleven is at the corner of Fullerton and Milwaukee, and some other retail buildings. So we're all across Chicago, but Logan Square has some great character, some great buildings, and there's a lot of great things going for it that I think lend well for various types of development.
And Amie, did you want to say more?
Just again, I guess here on this panel, I'm artist, but I also am representing Somos Logan Square. We're a grassroots group that kind of formed out of the evictions that Mark Fishman had this last winter, and it's also working with everybody and starting to organize the neighborhood and educate the neighborhood about gentrification. So I guess being on this panel is just an extension.
One of the things I'd like to start out with is just to ask Mark here, just I want us to understand what a baseline definition is of affordable, because I think sometimes when we talk about affordable, we're talking about a whole lot of other stuff, a whole lot of other baggage, and I would just like to know, what are the numbers for affordable? What are we talking about? Like, what's a 2-bedroom apartment for, you were telling me earlier, come on.
Yeah. Well, it's very simply, the definition of affordable housing through the perspective of most of the programs that support the creation of affordable housing is that if a person is spending 30% or less of their income on their housing costs, they are living in an affordable housing situation. And so the difficulty comes in which population are we targeting with that creation or preservation or development or of that affordable housing. So affordable housing for someone who makes $200,000 a year is very different than affordable housing for someone who makes poverty level wages.
And so in Avondale, this is a very local festival on a very local panel, very local issues. What would you go to for your numbers? I mean, how would you find, what would affordable be? Say that Mitch here wanted to develop a property and he wanted to make the apartments affordable.
Right.
What would that be?
If you're if you wanted to target the a typical household in this neighborhood, you can go to the Census Bureau. You can find out by zip code, by community area, what the median income of that neighborhood is. And so typically, actually, for the city of Chicago, the median income is about $40,000 to $45,000, depending on where you're looking. That's the entire city. So one way to look at it is to say, these are the people that live here. If I want to help the folks that are making 50% of that median income or 30 or 80% of that median income, that's going to be the income I'm going to target, and then I'm going to take 30% of that, and that's what I'm going to charge for my housing. So but by default, usually, again, where we go for these definitions and the motivations for defining these things is to the government programs that are available to subsidize these programs. And so the government programs typically are saying you need to serve 30, 50, 80% of the median income. You need to serve that population. One of the challenges in Chicago is the measuring stick for median income is the entire region. It's the suburbs and the city. And so by that measuring stick, the median income is about $74,000 for a family of 4. So if you're using that resource, you're actually already having a challenge to serve a population at $30,000 or $40,000. So that's kind of just a little bit of perspective.
So a developer could actually, if he was using that $74,000 as a baseline, he could just already be pricing his properties out of. And
Yes.
I see, John, you seem to have something that had a chart that looked like it had what?
I can send this around. This is a fact sheet that an organization called the Chicago Rehab Network created. And there's an Avondale fact sheet on one side, Logan Square on the other side, with some hard numbers.
Good.
And Lynn, I think I would add, we even have to be careful about looking at the median income of a particular community area, because that often masks dramatic differences in income between populations. So you might have, primarily working class, Latino, long-time population, and let's say that their median household income is $34,000, $35,000, and a newcomer, a young professional population, their median income is $66,000. These are roughly the figures for Logan Square currently. That all gets smushed together and comes out as a median income for Logan Square of, I think, $48,000, something like that. So you have to look at the numbers, but then do some deeper research and look behind the numbers, because sometimes within a single community you have dual markets, multiple populations that are experiencing very different economics.
So you could really see where the tension would come in, where the friction would come in. And I have no, I'm just kind of like the innocent here, not the innocent, but it's like I don't have any ideas for solutions for this. So, and Ellen, you seem to have some comments. Did you have some comments based on?
Oh, just no, to the data disaggregation point. I mean, I think if we look, for instance, at the area on here, because this is a lot of numbers and it took me a long time to decipher these two. If you look at the rental housing cost burden section on the top right-hand corner, you can see the second line down is paying over 30% of their income in rent. So in 2010 in Avondale, 47.8% of people in Avondale were paying more than 30% of their income in rent. So almost 50% of the Avondale population was technically not in affordable housing. Their housing was inaffordable. And HUD specifically says that a family with one full-time worker earning minimum wage cannot afford the local fair market rent for any two-bedroom apartment anywhere in the United States. So when we're really talking about, people who are working minimum wage jobs, even working minimum wage jobs in two-income households, the ability to afford a market rate apartment is nearly impossible. And to John's point, even if we're taking the average between our sort of most vulnerable economically residents and our newcomers, we're likely still getting to just what is fair market rent for those households, and they can't afford it. So I think that's part of what these data points can help us really think through.
And Mitch, I have a bunch of questions I want to ask you, but I just want to ask, have you respond, if you have any response so far to what we've been talking about?
Well, I mean, I would say that, the rents that landlords will often charge as a result of the values that those properties have and the price that sellers are commanding the properties that they want to sell them are going to be based on what they perceive as market. So, while some landlords may just increase rent because they want to, other lands are doing it because they have to, because to pay a seller of a property a certain price, they need to maintain a certain level of income on their side. And the thing I would point out is that it's true that the numbers showing that more owners or more residents are, went up from paying over 30% of income and rent went up between 2000 and 2010. So did the income, the household by income level. The residents with 75,000 or more also went up by 39%. So while it definitely affected some in a negative way, there's other people in the area that are making more money now and are commanding better or more expensive housing products. So I don't think anything can happen that's going to benefit everybody. Some people are going to be forced out, other people are going to be coming in, but it's about finding that balance that to keep the people here that have been here and then bringing in new people.
I just want to add to that too, and yes, the overall average of income has gone up here, but also there has been an influx of new residents, young working class professionals in Logan Square. In Logan Square proper, in about 1990, it was probably about 35–40% white, and now it's over 80%. So the demographics have changed, which I really feel has created a lot of that specific statistic to increase, which should be noted as well. But you don't always see when you don't have those maps and those demographics. That has created.
Lynn, can I add one other thought? Avondale has a remarkable opportunity to learn from the experiences of some of the nearby communities like Logan Square. Avondale has a remarkable opportunity to preserve economic and ethnic diversity, but it's going to take a broad-based civic effort. It's going to take a lot of people and institutions working together. But I think one thing that's important to note is that when we talk about affordable housing as a key part of that solution, the smartest strategy, I think, is to think of that affordable housing as both rehab and some new construction in certain places. It's home ownership as well as rental. It's subsidized, but it's also the private market. How do you let the private market keep on providing affordable housing? One of the ways you do that is you look at stability. Unfortunately, the real estate industry can thrive on instability. Communities need stability. So one of the things we need to look at is we actually need to look at factors beyond housing itself, because people don't just live in a home or an apartment, they live in a neighborhood. So for example, if the mix of storefronts stays diverse, and I as a resident can go to a local store and communicate in Spanish, or I'm a moderate income family, I can go to a store that has prices that are products that are priced so I can afford them. That's going to affect my housing decisions, right? Whether I reinvest in that community or whether I feel like I have to move on, this community is no longer for me. So we have to think really broadly in our strategies about avoiding displacement and maintaining diversity.
And I completely intuited that and would like to see that happen. So that's why I was really excited that we have Mitch on the panel, because I was like, I feel like the gentrification is a force of nature. I feel like, how do you do that? I mean, what incentive do you have Mitch, to like have certain units be affordable, or have retail local businesses be,
Well, I think part of the challenge is that a lot of the buildings that would be considered affordable are older buildings that may not have modern appliances, and a lot of them need some fixing up. And the city is hammering down on buildings that are in violation or maybe are not to code, and the cost of fixing air conditioning units or a roof is going to be the same on a building that's commanding $1,500 for a 2-bedroom as moving for $1,000. So just keeping up these buildings into a condition that would be tenable, forces a lot of owners to maintain a certain level of rent. So I think it's really about finding those buildings that are well maintained, that have that flexibility to offer varied levels of rent. Because some of them you buy a building for a market price, and you have to upgrade it, you have to make sure it passes all the inspections, and it's difficult for an owner to do that and also offer what would be considered below market rents for a lot of those units. So.
And there's one other question on here too, and it kind of arose from when I was talking to your partner, Howard Matinsky, and he wasn't able to make it today, he's out of town, but he was mentioning that a lot of